This is Speaking of Writers. I'm Steve Richards. After 25 years of service in the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi thought he knew everything there was to know about America's criminal underbelly until he learned about a gruesome pattern of murders that led to the founding of the Bureau's Highway Serial Killings, HSK initiative. Today, this dedicated unit has amassed an astonishing list of at least 850 murders believed to be linked to a solitary breed of predators, long-haul truckers. Their victims are almost all sex-trafficked women. Floored by this revelation, Figliuzzi decided he had to know more because the FBI believes there are multiple serial killer truckers still operating on our highways. In the new book, Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers, veteran FBI special agent, NBC News national security contributor, and best-selling author Frank Figliuzzi takes us inside his year-long quest to understand the mysterious subcultures of long-haul truckers, sex-trafficked victims, and the crime analysts trying to stop the killing. Frank was the assistant director of Counterintelligence at the FBI, where he served 25 years as a special agent and directed all espionage investigations across the government. In his current role as a respected national security analyst, he is a regular contributor to NBC News and MSNBC and a sought-after speaker on violence prevention and the threats, both external and internal, facing the United States. He is also the author of the national bestseller, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. Happy to have for the very first time Frank Figliuzzi join me now here on Speaking of Writers. Frank, welcome to this program.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad we could do this and hopefully shed some light on a pretty dark spot in our society.
It really is. So what inspired you to write this book, Long Haul?
I have a natural sense of investigative interest and curiosity. Obviously, I gravitated toward the FBI after law school, 25 years of investigation and leading investigation. So during my career, I was also a chief inspector of the FBI. That meant that I got into all the nooks and crannies of the FBI. Even FBI employees don't know all the spots in the FBI that are there. But I didn't know until I retired that the FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative even existed, that it was still going on, and the staggering numbers involved. You mentioned one number, 850 murders along our nation's highways, mostly of women, mostly of sex-trafficked women, just in the last few decades. But here's some other numbers that shocked me and motivated me to get out in the field and put my investigator hat back on. Number one, 25 long-haul truckers have already been imprisoned for multiple homicides. Number two, of those 850 cases, the FBI considers 200 of them to be open and unsolved. And in those unsolved cases, they are looking at 450 suspects in the long-haul community.
Wow. There are three subcultures at work here: the truckers, the traffic victims, and the investigators. Who are these truckers?
That's the question that I wanted to answer for myself and now for everyone that can have the book. I wanted to dig into those three subcultures. I didn't want to just write a book, Steve, that was scary. Here's a scary problem. Have a nice day. Here's the most heinous killers on the road. Here you go. Have a nice day. I wanted to write a study of three subcultures, and the trucker subculture is fascinating to people. Even if you have no interest in trucking, you've got to concede that on the highway, you've looked at the big rigs and said, who's driving that? What do they make? Do they have kids? How often do they get home? All of that is answered in the book because I rode over 2,000 miles with a long-haul trucker. I rode flatbed across the country and asked those questions, and then dug into the real questions an investigator wonders: which kind of trucker in which kind of truck is most likely to be the killer? I theorize on that question and the answer in the book.
The book focuses on the work of the FBI Highway Serial Killings Initiative, HSK, which we talked about. What prompted the Bureau to establish this special unit?
As is often the case, the FBI's support of law enforcement in various areas is not necessarily their original idea, but rather a need in law enforcement is brought to their attention and they fill the gap. So in this case, not an original idea, the HSK initiative, but rather a crime analyst in Oklahoma in 2003 insisted that the FBI send some crime analyst to a meeting she was having to talk about the fact that 10 young women were missing from Oklahoma and had turned up dead in other states. In fact, Terry Turner is a hero in my book. Imagine that long ago, a female crime analyst in Oklahoma who might be asked to go get some coffee by detectives is now insisting, we have a problem, 10 girls missing and turned up dead, all from Oklahoma. She's insisting the FBI show up. She holds a meeting in Oklahoma and sends a teletype out to all homicide detectives in the country. If you have a case that's roadside, a trafficked woman, and you feel that it might be a trucker, I'm having a meeting. She thinks maybe 8 or 10 detectives will show up. Dozens show up in Oklahoma and the FBI shows up. And when they hear the facts of those cases, they say, you've got serial killings, we're in, and that's the birth of the Highway Serial Killings Initiative, which is largely not only crime analysts with great expertise, no badge, no gun, but computers and years of wisdom, and then a database that uses technology to connect the dots to hopefully stop the killing.
The most notorious was in 1990, right? Rhodes? Was he the really the most notorious trucking serial killer?
But by most accounts, people who study this thing agree that Robert Ben Rhodes was likely the most heinous, prolific killer, not only for the span of his time, he killed for years and years, but the number of his victims is believed to be 50 victims. And the only reason he was caught was one day an Arizona state trooper saw his big rig, pulled over to the side of the highway in Casa Grande, Arizona, hazard lights flashing. The trooper gets out of his car, walks up to the rig, and hears a woman screaming. And that woman is naked and shackled to the floor and ceiling of Rhodes' truck. That was the beginning of the end of Robert Ben Rhodes.
But the problem here, Frank, is too, it crosses multiple states. They'll pick up someone in one state, right? They'll commit a crime in a second state, and then the actual murder will be in the third state, if not more.
This is the crux of the problem and why the FBI plays such an important role here. The truckers are exploiting the fact that they're driving an 18-wheel mobile crime scene across the country. They grab, as you said, they grab a victim in one jurisdiction, they kill and or rape her in a second police jurisdiction, and they dump the remains in a third. So the challenge of law enforcement is immense here. They may not be come onto this body, which is often disposed of in a remote area, for months or weeks after the death. So now they have no identity left on this woman. They don't know who she is, let alone who did it. And the size of this investigative effort has to include what? Hundreds of truck companies that may have had a driver pass through that region over what, 3-6 months ago? It is immense, and that's where the FBI comes in.
Frank, does this occupation of long-haul trucking attract sociopaths?
I asked in the book the nature or nurture question, the classic question, right? And so the answer is it's complicated. It's a little of both in the sense of, we know from serial killer research that many serial killers actually start in the womb, meaning there is a genetic component to their mental illness, brain synapses not firing correctly, all of that. But then you mix in often an environmental issue, a very abusive childhood in some cases, an absent parent or two. Often the mother figure is an issue because you see these guys eventually committing violence against women, clearly projecting their problems. So do they actually raise their hand for long haul trucking because they intend to kill at the time they're applying for work? I think not. I think they get to the job and then they realize I could do almost anything with this job and get away with it. Long stretches of highway, little accountability. just get your delivery from point A to point B and leave us alone and leave me alone. And then it dawns on them, I could actually kill. So the predisposition toward violence, particularly toward women, then begins to play out in that big rig.
Are they motivated by a sexual component?
We know there's two kinds of serial killers. We know that the first one likes to control the outcome. He's about the power and the control, and he prolongs his torture and sexual activity and rape against his victim. He enjoys that prolonged power. The second kind of serial killer is not about sex at all, and we seldom see sex as a component in these killings. They are about the power over life and death, and they kill quickly. And you can sense the urgency in law enforcement when they think they're dealing with one of those serial killers. So we see both in the book, some raping, some absolutely not.
Let's talk about sex trafficking for a moment. How does sex trafficking and drug addiction make at-risk women particularly vulnerable to falling prey to murderous truckers?
That is the second subculture that I dug into. And I went out in the field and interviewed victims of truckers who survived violent encounters with long-haul truckers because they were trafficked to truckers. And so it's interesting, the commonalities that exist among long-haul killers and the commonalities that exist among trafficking victims often intersect. What is it? Go back to childhood. It's an early trauma with the sex trafficked victim. I interviewed these women. I talked to the top 2 experts in the country on trafficking and how you fall into the trap of trafficking. And you've got unwanted touching or sexual molestation, even young, 8, 10, 11 years of age. You then have more trauma in the family, a death of a parent, a sibling, a suicide attempts, domestic violence in the house. You then have kind of an escape to a boyfriend or a series of bad boyfriends who become the affection in your life, but they become the groomer, the recruiter, and ultimately the pimp who introduces hard drugs after starting often with marijuana. And now they're hooked on the boyfriend, the drugs, and the sex for money before they can even realize they are being trafficked.
We talked about some of the challenges earlier across multiple states. These crimes are committed. What makes the work of FBI crime analysts with the HSK initiative incredibly challenging? What are some of the other challenges?
One is this is a garbage in, garbage out proposition. The FBI can't help you solve your case if they don't even know about it. So part of the job of the folks in this unit is to go out in the field and sell, market the initiative and the database. Many departments don't even know the database exists. And then they say, when they find out about it, are you asking me to fill out a 200-question survey about my crime scene? Do you really want to know the eye color and the hair color and the height and weight of my victim and whether she was strangled or gagged or shot or stabbed? Really? And the answer is, oh, really? Because that is the data that will help us connect the dots. So it's a marketing job. Sometimes it's at the sheriff's office. It's a resource job. We don't have detectives, let alone a crime analyst, to fill this out. So the FBI comes alongside and says, do you need grant money for that analyst? Do you even have a computer that can hook up to our system? You know, we're talking rural county sheriff's office sometimes. So this is a sales job. It's a support job. And then comes the expertise of these mostly women, by the way, crime analysts back at Quantico, Virginia, FBI Academy, who are now connecting those dots. Sometimes it's just opening the newspaper in the morning. They see a body dumped, right, in some locale, and they go, hold on a minute. They pick up the phone, call the department, and say, we think we can help you.
There's an organization, Truckers Against Trafficking. Talk about the mission of that organization.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this because it would be easy from this brief conversation we're having to say, I think this guy's bad-mouthing all long-haul truckers. And I go out of my way in the book to say, I came away from my 2,000 miles on the road very impressed with long-haul truckers and trucking and modern day trucking, very high tech. These are guys and gals trying to put food on their own table by bringing food to us. And Truckers Against Trafficking, now known as TAT, sees those long-haul truckers as eyes and ears of the anti-trafficking movement. Who better than somebody who lives on the road to spot and assess the potential for trafficking? So every year, TAT trains long-haul truckers, and every year they give out hero trucker awards for truckers who actually see something, report it, and rescue someone from trafficking.
And Frank, finally, what would you like readers to take away from long haul?
There's a couple of things here. One is you should, as I had to do, cast aside your biases about who you think falls into the trafficking trap. If you think it can't happen to someone you know, or your loved one would never hang out at a truck stop, let me tell you, that's not where it's at right now. Where it's at right now is online, the recruiting, the grooming, the advertising, and the recruiting is taking place within your loved ones, your young person's circle of friends and network of relatives. That's where it's going to be. It's eye-opening for that. And if you just have an interest in that truck alongside you on the highway and want to know what it's like in there, this is for you too. Lastly, if you love solving a mystery and you're into all the FBI shows and Criminal Minds, you'll like the Subculture explanation of the crime analyst.
He is Frank Figliuzzi. The book is Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers. It is out now, available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and also at your independent bookstore. If they don't have it, ask for it too. Shop local. Frank, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
And this is Speaking of Writers.